and projects that are part of GPE KIX LAC. The idea is that we can get to know these projects, what they're doing, and that we also see how we can involve from our countries to these initiatives. And to start from a strategic glimpse, we will we'll speak about the regional strategy of GPE KICS for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I want to invite Katherina Hruskovec, responsible for national participation of GPE, and Mohamed Yassine, and we receive them both with a big applause.
Hello, everybody. Oh, great, it works. All right, thanks for having us. My name is Mohamed Yassine, and I'm the engagement lead for the Caribbean region. And
Y yo soy Katherina Hruskovec, soy la líder de país para los países de Latinoamérica.
And so we work together, but each one within different countries of the region. And basically, we wanted to briefly, as you've heard, GPE has done some sort of restructuring where, as engagement lead, we have an additional. So we used to work with individual countries, and now the approach is we're adding the regional angle. So we realize that there is a lot of learning to be done from across the region. So instead of just being only country specific, we added an additional work to our work, basically, which is also how do we bring the region together. And this is the rationale for what we call a regional engagement strategy. So this is not reinventing the wheel. GPE is already working. This is already country-owned work. And the idea is that how can we help you more with that regional angle? So what does the regional strategy entails? So it will help tailor the GPE support, so our support to you, to advance system transformation at the country level and at the regional level. And it would help us also define our added value at the regional level. And those are 6 dimensions where GPE already works and supports the country at the national level that we can also advance even further from a regional perspective. So as you know, we work with every country supporting them in their education sector plan development. We work on the Partnership Compact. The country defines their priority reform. And this is now to talk about how do we support the national priority reforms at looking at the regional aspect of it. So basically the common themes across the region so that we can work together towards those priorities. Same for the other dimensions. So how do we build partnerships at the regional level? How do we tailor our grants and instruments at the regional level, help you raise money, mobilize knowledge, and communicate results? So I'll start with the first pillar. And so the first pillar tries to answer what strategic themes are common across the region. So what are the common priorities across the region that the countries have identified and that would benefit the most from regional cooperation? We obviously can't do everything, but every country has a national priority, and so it builds from the Partnership Compact. Every country has their national priority, and so we are trying to identify from those national priorities which group of countries are working on the same thing, and how can we bring that knowledge together. There's also regional strategies, for example, the OECS strategy, the CARICOM regional strategy. I'm not sure if there's one at the Latin American side, but we can definitely see how that work. And there's also global challenges that we're building on. So as you can see, I'm not going to go in detail on this slide, but as you can see, there's national priorities that the countries have identified. This is not from us. And so and there's also those global challenges. Yeah, you're not gonna read the previous one. Sorry, that's the opposite. How do you go? Okay, and there's also global challenges like climate change, migration. So those are challenges that affect a region and globally too. So those definitely are good for regional collaboration, right? Like climate change, migration, gender, skills for work, the future of work, technology, instability, security, etc. So those are, in addition to national priorities, we need to take those challenges that affects all countries together and how we can work together towards this. So from all of this, we've been listening, including during this event, right? During these 3 days, what are the common themes that are coming? So as you can see, there's a lot. So we're not committing to working on everything regionally, but there are definitely some aspects that would be helpful regionally. So the first one is about ECE and foundational learning. So several of our countries are going into curriculum reform. So how can we work together across the region on this aspect? Several countries have been talking about teachers, so teacher pre-service. We've heard from Dr. Bristol and Yuri's work in the region. So how can we support that work? We've listened about the challenge of teachers' attrition. So this is a regional challenge rather than a country-specific challenge. So this is where a regional support could be helpful, because then not every country has to do it on their own, basically. I'll move quickly on the other one. So continuity of learning. This also affects several of our countries. Climate change, security, reaching all children. So students with special education needs. We've heard it that we want to learn from each other on that aspect, because there's, we don't want to make the same mistakes. Mother tongue language, I've heard it from several countries, including from Latin America and the Caribbean. So this is something shared. Indigenous population, migrants and displaced populations. Digital transformation, it's a common theme across nearly every country. Every country was talking about technology. Some countries talked about AI. Skills for growth, life and work. So not only work, but also socio-emotional learning, how to be a good citizen. And this is also a theme across the region. And finally, to talk and discuss with our regional partners like OECS, CARICOM, and other regional partners on what kind of regional goods can be created for the entire region. So one of the regional good, I guess, is the pre-service teacher curriculum. That is a regional good that benefits everybody. But then how can we move on assessment, for example, in the Caribbean with CXC? So this is a type of regional good that applies for the region. Okay, so this is on regional priorities. Kate will talk about partnerships.
Muchas... Ay, ¿y ahora? Pasé todo.
No, it was the other one.
Oh.
Okay, so as a sample that we are a multicultural organization, I'll do my part in Spanish. When we speak about alliances, as Mohamed, my colleague, was saying, some of us may remember that the focal points of the countries had a meeting and they discussed many of these topics at a country level. And we discussed this internally in the area of alliances. Who is missing? And here we talk about.
It's important because, as you know, we work as local education groups, which are this inclusive platforms that gather all key stakeholders in the educational sector, presided by the governments of the different countries, ministries of education. So since we work under that platform.
So who's missing for the group to be more inclusive and advance towards this goal? And it was a surprise, but one of the things we found was that the academy, the think tanks, and the investigation centers sometimes are members of the local groups of education, but their presence can be strengthened. And this is why these meetings are so important, because it's an opportunity for us to share the results and the work you're doing at a local level, and for us, for all of us, to incentivize this evidence to take better decisions for local groups. The experience I'd like to tell you is in the case of El Salvador. Remember, maybe our colleagues of El Salvador remember we identified an agenda to identify the gaps, to bring this evidence, to avoid these gaps and go to equality. Other important allies whose present we can strengthen are teachers. We've heard multiple times teachers are the most important factor that affects the system. How can we have this dialogue from a technical perspective where they can contribute with their experience based on interaction with the students? So this is what we want to reflect upon from the secretary of the GP at a global level for GP. Also, an actor that sometimes doesn't participate are the local groups, the representatives of parents and students. And here at this meeting, we've seen that education should be a process of the community where students are motivated and where they have a saying of how to obtain their own results. How can we bring these representatives from the parents and students to participate in these dialogues? And lastly, strengthen the presence of private sector. So thinking of how we can add them to these groups is very important, mainly at places of high risk. But not only, and as Mohamed was saying, we too have the mission of seeing how we can advance in regional alliances. And this is interesting because many of the member countries are new. Some weren't eligible for financing recently. On our behalf, we think that it's very important also to support or talk with organizations who have a presence at a regional level and go deep into CARICOM or the Caribbean Organization Council or regional banks. We have worked very recently with BID, CDB, but none of our multipliers in this topic of financing. We haven't touched the Central American Bank or the CAF, so we have this intention of widening our reach towards these organizations with which we haven't had any relationship so far. Then the private sector and regional foundations like Educa, etc. So we believe that from the GPE side we can advance, trying not to invent the wheel, but get together with a dialogue that's already existing with our instruments, our technical assistance, and so far. And the next area is the area of the instruments and subventions, and we were wondering what's the added value of GPE, how in the next cycle of financing can be the value that we add, how can we customize the instruments for the region. When I say instruments, it's grants, assistance, and all these mechanisms like the one of KIX. And here we have some ideas, and like we said, we are all trying to have a dialogue. We want your feedback. But what we thought is first to have technical assistance. Perhaps some of you have had this technical assistance. We have one in health, another one in climate change for Caribbean countries, another one that's called Safe to Learn, and another one for AT that El Salvador is part of. So we've been thinking that there is a big opportunity in these areas that Mohamed was saying to have some synergies. And some of them can be performed at a regional area like Safe to Learn. We face many common challenges and some associated factors like risks for children who are exposed to gangs, pregnancy in teenagers, and the other thing is that we may have a multiplying subvention The expectancy is that at the next cycle of financing of GPE, we have an investment ratio of 4:1 on behalf of international entities, and we would keep the 1:1 subvention from the private sector. This is something that is useful when you can find private funds too. El Salvador, for example, had some funds that needed to be addressed, and they were able to raise $30 million. So we believe this has been a very successful subvention. They got more than they expected. Plus, we have the possibility to widen these regional subventions. In the Caribbean, we have this experience. The ministers were speaking about this, where they widen the regional subventions to Central America to finance any priorities that we've already discussed. So this is a big opportunity we are investigating, and we want your ideas in order to refine it. In the area of fundings, we have many questions in terms of public spending, national public spending. I think I don't need to go deeper on our behalf. We are committed to bet on helping the dialogues with the local education groups to try to advocate the volume of financing. We have a benchmark of 20% of the budget of education, but it's not only about volume. It's also to see how we can support the efficiency in the budget. There's a high potential to raise funds in the region for the region. And that's important because it doesn't always happen in the regions, but we believe there is a potential in the region, in private sector. And here I rescue what what happened in Guatemala, where these multiplying funds had a lot of success. They aimed for 10 millions, and finally they ended up raising 40 million. So it's important to collaborate, and for the information of everyone, GPE KIX, we will launch their fundraising campaign that will start in September 25, and the closing ceremony will be in the first trimester of 2026. We will try to mobilize ministries of education and countries to go together to donors to ask them to invest in education and mobilize also at a local level. And we believe there is a very good opportunity with this campaign to find donors or organizations who are willing to invest in Latin America and the Caribbean.
So the next dimension is knowledge mobilization, which obviously we have been talking about during these 3 days. And the questions that we're trying to answer is what mechanisms are needed to identify knowledge gaps, and how can we bring knowledge and evidence to the government and leg when they need it. And so some of the ideas that have been coming up is strengthening the partnership for knowledge at the country level and at the regional level. And so this is through, we have already existing leg, we have a regional forum as well at the OECS level. And how can we strengthen the dialogue on the knowledge agenda within those local education groups? And how can we bring and strengthen the presence and engagement of research institutions, universities, in the local education group, so that we can talk about the knowledge gap and how do we advance that knowledge. Then it's about how do we identify knowledge gaps, and we were thinking about how do we streamline it within the existing country systems and GPE processes that have been doing. So for example, when we're working on the education sector plan, when we're working on the partnership compact, we can already identify those are areas where we have a knowledge gap that we need to strengthen. And so that allows us to move faster on those aspects, including during program development. So when we're designing a program and we say we want to do this type of intervention, we can already start and identifying what knowledge gap are missing and what expertise do we need to understand the effectiveness of some interventions. And then strengthening, translating knowledge into practice. We've heard it, I think, also in the previous panel. So we need to strengthen that aspect, leveraging KIX, leveraging the system capacity grant to there's already a lot of pilots and solutions, so how can we leverage that to scale through our existing grants, like the System Transformation Grant, the multiplier programs, so that there is more, stronger linkage between the knowledge work that we're financing and the implementation work that we're financing, and they're linked together. And then the final dimension, which is a dimension I also heard is a weakness, so we need to do a bit more work on this, is results and communication. So how do we communicate, how do we measure progress in education? How do we communicate those results? And that's going to be a key aspect going forward. So the first one is we need to strengthen the country's ability to measure results of programs. We need to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation framework, the data systems to be able to capture those results. Reporting, we need to support you in order to report on regional and global indicators. So what sort of capacity here is needed to report on those indicators? On the partnership level, we need to foster mechanisms like joint sector reviews. So those are the opportunity of working all together to review progress of the sector and identify where we need to correct action moving forward. And then on communication, we need to leverage the different leg partners. So we have different types of partners at the leg. We have teachers' unions, we have parents, and we need to bring those different perspectives to discuss how do we message, how do we communicate what the Ministry of Education is doing, what we're doing in education, to the public, to the teachers, to the donors as well. And so this is something we can be working together on crafting those communication messages. And then the final point is joint advocacy across the region. So instead of every country kind of advocating for education, can we come all together and have common messages to advocate for education financing in the region? Thank you.
Since we are, I will give space to 2 questions. If you have a question, maybe more than a question. It's a comment. It's a comment or a suggestion. At the slide, you spoke about coalition that gathers many follow-up. I have a suggestion that you include a follow-up. In Brazil, we have social movements, the organizations of the society, like unions, organizations who are part, to put it this way, of the place where the kids are. I think it's very important that they are a part of this coalition, of this alliance. And that's powerful. And I suggest, or a question, if you allow, I would like to make use or say something. I suggest that the ministers who are here talk to their presidents, because it's very important to sign this letter of Antigua by the ministries. It's fundamental to avoid your name, Gregory. He says that that you need to look for money, and he's right, because there is education as a reivindication. The health is important. For example, if one of the parents died, education is necessary. And it's necessary that the presidents face this challenge together with the ministries, because the ministry of economy depends on the president. So thank you for the space. Thank you so much for this comment. And exactly, I think this is what we try to promote from this World Alliance of Education. And maybe I didn't put enough stress, but at the local support groups, we have the support of the society. And there's a question, there's a union called Education Out Loud. It's important to highlight it and to highlight the participation of the society in these groups. And I make echo of your suggestion, because one of the things that we will request from the countries, we have the Ministry of El Salvador, and we've also been talking to Guatemala and Mohamed with his counterparts at the Caribbean, because exactly for this campaign of refinancing, we're looking for commitment from the countries to finance the educational sector. So for this event, we've been talking to achieve the president, that there's a commitment, a high-level commitment to finance the educational sector, and that this is part of this event, of this campaign of refinancing, because it's not only the donors who put the efforts, it's also the countries who want the same priority.
And maybe quickly, if I can add something, it really appreciate and a lot of gratitude for sharing the Sobral experience, because the part that I didn't know much, I knew about the results, but the part that I didn't know much was the partnership, the alianzas that we have been talking about, and that GPE is at the heart of it, is building those partnerships for education. So it was very helpful to, and yesterday we had that conversation, very helpful to learn from how you build this alliance, this partnership for that reform. And so this is a great example to learn to build this coalition in every country, but also coalition maybe even at the regional level for education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we are here, we're ready, and now we will continue with the presentation about the Coalition of Faculties of Education, and we will invite Laurette Bristol, Director of the School of Education of the University of West India, and Raúl Chacón, our Director of GPE KIX LAC program. Welcome, please.
Good morning, everyone, again. How are you? So I'm really honored to have this opportunity here with my colleague Raúl from SUMMA for us to speak a little bit more about the Coalition of Faculties, which is a proposal that we wish to put on the table and want to invite other academic institutions, university into the conversation as we think about how we need to be working together to facilitate initial teacher training education. So the stories of the last 3 days have been flagging for us in very significant ways that when we think about teacher education in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are recognizing that there's some very fragmented approaches in some spaces. There's a clear disconnect between research and pedagogical practice, that we need to strengthen and enhance more inter-institutional collaboration, and of course, do this in order to close those barriers that may have been preventing us from more effective innovations. As such, what we want to propose in this alliance to improve initial teacher education, we need to do that if we want to continue to ensure the relevance of educational programs across Latin America and the Caribbean. Importantly, when we recognize the need for updated curricula, we've talked about the need for highly qualified teacher educators, we've talked about the need for practice-based education and continuing professional development. We recognize that this is important if we are to have a positive impact on teacher performance and consequently, as you all know, on student learning. This creation of coalition that we want to put on the table for you will contribute to our coordination efforts, sharing experiences and best practices, developing joint research opportunities, and of course, generating strategies to attend to some of the issues within teacher education that are common across the region. So I'll hand over to Raúl.
Good evening to you. This initiative comes to be from the work we've been doing with the University of West Indies in the last years. And effectively, yes, it's an invitation. We said before, of coalitions. In this case, specifically, thinking about how to generate these collaboration spaces in the region between institutions who are forming teachers as a shared effort. The work that we've done, I'll be very brief because we want to hear you too from your countries, and particularly those institutions who are involved in these topics. We work with the university identifying the needs. This is central for any process we wish to start to update the curriculum as far as the associated degree of education. And here we see what happens in the rest of the world, in the rest of the countries, not only in regards of other universities, but also what the educational systems of other countries, their policies of formation are doing. This idea of the benchmarking to see what's going on in the world is important. Of course, with a support process of different actors, we advanced with this work that was led by Dr. Bristol from the University of West Indies. We found Dr. Warrican before, and now it's her turn. So there are relays that need to happen along the way. So we approved. This was a very important benchmark in the joint board of Eastern Caribbean. This proposal began to walk along the route to appropriate this adaptation, socialization of what's defined jointly with all the countries. All this is done with each country, where the Barbados campus is working. And lastly, point out that the process is a co-construction. And also looking towards the implementation, it requires and it leads to the professional development that needs to happen at all countries. The dimensions that we identified are that of a curriculum that considers, of course, the skills, the competences of this century, the effective practices, the practicum. I won't stop here because Mrs. Bristol already mentioned it. The different pedagogical skills, the inclusion in the classrooms, and some other perspectives to work with technology. So the invitation is done. We are talking among us for a period of perhaps 1.5 years towards the end of 2026. That's the horizon we're setting for this job, to focus specifically on forming of education actors and to hear not only the voice of the university or the institutes, but also some of the stakeholder policies and systematization and prioritization of common regional challenges, good practices that can be shared among us. There's a need for connecting FOE research with policy making processes also. Not only initial teacher formation, but how this is connected with the policy formation at each country. We need to identify the progress and the common challenges we face. These are our objectives, and this is what we will start, produce and mobilize knowledge among faculties of education in the region, disseminate good practices and lessons in the LAC region, and map those from other regions, because this is key. So we need to generate evidence-informed repository with resources so that each country can take better decisions in an informed way. I won't stop with this proposed work plan. I would just like to highlight the temporality. If we start in the second half of this year, we then go to the next year. First, we will find a diagnosis to identify those challenges and disadvantages we might have, and then effectively move into concrete responses, and then into a practical committee with subcommittees in regards to the themes. We were speaking about what we do in the early childhood education system. That's a clear priority we found, so advance in this direction and generate a climate where we move on forward. And I just wanted to mention this real quick, because what we really want is to have a moment for feedback and also contributions on your behalf. I'd like to leave the floor for some of you, because we thought of having at least a couple of minutes. How much sense this makes in the sense of what's being done. And perhaps I'd like to start with Nidia from Guatemala, who has a very interesting experience. So if you would like to come up here. And please, Nidia, if you can just briefly say your name. I'm Nidia Georgis from Guatemala, and I represent the consortium of universities towards teachers formation, founded 2011. We are turning 15 next year. Just to give you a glimpse of the importance of the teachers formation in universities, I'd like you to raise your hand. Who has attended the university here? Raise your hands. Not information, any formation. Thank you. And teaching information or formation of teachers? Sorry. Our consortium in Guatemala nowadays gathers 10 universities. It's changed. It's based on many principles and values. Main of the union is the main one. We believe that jointly we can achieve bigger things. And we have changed along these 15 years our activities. We're focused on children and youngsters and how they learn. And our practices search for this activity. How are we impacting the children's learning procedure? We have a very close communication with the Ministry of Education and all the organizations that work on children's learning processes. Besides Union, we also have the value of sharing, because we're stronger when we share in order not to make the mistakes others have made. So we've worked forming teachers in a unique initiative. I love to talk about it. It's the forming of forming persons. Every person was in charge of one of the modules. This is unique in the region. Just imagine to have 10 universities come together and one of each module. And then the interesting part was that the students were our formators. They rotated one by one each module, and at the end, we graduated. We were 24 persons of formators for formation. That's an idea that we had. We've also worked on important courses like the DUA course, Universal Design of Learning. We had a first cut of teachers for the public sector, also open to other teachers, and we want to do another one because DUA is centered on eliminating these barriers so that everyone is included. Inclusion means everybody together. Never again speak about us without us. And this is why the person who facilitated the DUA is a person who really knows about inclusion. And another course we have is the knowledge fund, how we value this cultural part, this part that the student already knows what the community gives him. And we have other courses, but I won't take more time. Just a proof of what we can do when we get together. Thank you, Nidia. Thanks for being with us. It's interesting, this experience towards the inside of the countries, which is an ideal. We're happy to have Nidia's participation and Guatemala's coalition. Maris, Butler.
Would you like to give a few words on this, or she's from the College of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We had this conversation before.
Good morning, everyone. Or is it good afternoon? I'm not even sure as yet. So I'm representing the Division of Teacher Education in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For some unknown reason, my little label keeps dropping off. We do welcome collaboration. One of the things, though, that I would really like to say is that in the interest of our territories, all collaboration must be contextual. We must recognize that within each territory we have trained persons, we have persons who are familiar with what is happening in our own education systems. So our collaboration has to take that into consideration. If we don't do that, collaboration could never work. So we do welcome collaboration as part of the JBT with SUMMA and KIX, and we recognize the need for that collaboration, but we also recognize the need for mutual appreciation and understanding from both sides.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butler.
I'm looking for Luis. I don't know if he's here right now, the rector of the Pedagogical University. No? Okay. Andres Galvez from the Del Valle University. He also wanted to speak. Thanks. Yes, today I didn't bring my jacket and I'm here, so I'm sorry. I wanted to highlight two things that we were discussing a while ago. we were hearing the topic of financing and how the technical times sometimes don't coincide with the political times, that what can the ministries do to have initiatives that generate an impact. And I believe the universities play a very important role. We can work, those universities that have research departments, as natural partners of the ministries to develop these investigation plans of implementation of longer term projects. And an example of this is an initiative that we had with fundings of USAID. It's the Red Lay, the literacy initiative that came to be when we saw that during the last 25 years we had 19 documents of how to learn to read and write, and only 5 came from Central America and the Caribbean, 4 from Guatemala, 1 from Costa Rica in 25 years. This was the scientific production of how we teach the children to read in Spanish. So in this financing of 25 years, we had over 30 documents. We have a colleague from Honduras who was part of this investigation department, so created this network of 7 universities. Financing ended, but since we exist as university and we have the commitment, this network is still financed by us. We don't have a financing at the UBG University, we finance it. The network is still alive. 7 universities in Central America and the Dominican Republic, so it's a platform that's working on initial literacy, and it's alive and at your disposal. Thank you, Andres, Director of the Investigation Center of University of Del Valle. I see you're here, Luis. Please come to us to have some of your inputs. Thank you. I'm Luis Mario Aparicio. I'm the rector of the Pedagogical University of El Salvador. And in these 3 days, I've had the opportunity to gather big information in regards to teachers' formation and the forming of formers for the early childhood. Due to policies of the First Lady of our country, it's been fundamental bringing and sharing with you. And having this group that's conformed today really makes us proud. We will walk, we will share, and we will improve. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. No doubt, this is a collaboration that requires to understand each of our realities in our countries. But of course, there are common challenges and some similitudes. I'd like to open the floor to you if you have a comment in regards of what we said.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for the opportunity. I want to begin by where I left off the last time that I spoke. I was asking, how do we define early childhood? And what I have noticed is that we have a bit of inconsistency, if I may, for want of a better word. And I'm saying that to say because nomenclature is very important. And if something is not properly articulated, it's not properly financed. And Mohamed was asking for us to put our heads together to get financing for early childhood. I listened with interest at the presentations that were made. I do not know if it was intentional that we were focusing on the later years of early childhood. And what went through my mind was, I am wondering what happens in these countries prior to entering school. So, I'm not sure if I have his correct name, Viver or something. Please spoke about this wonderful program. And he was speaking about learning to walk being natural, and it's important for early literacy. But teaching a child to read at 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, is 5 years, 6 years, 7 years too late. We need to trust the science and the need for early stimulation, and knowing that the neurons for literacy begin in the womb. And so when we define early childhood, is it early childhood education and care, early childhood development? We speak of holistic development. We should speak of early childhood development. And it also has implications for teacher education, because at the end of matriculation, where is the teacher going to be accepted? I go through a program for 2 to 3 years. I have graduated. Am I going to be told that you can only teach in a preschool and you cannot teach in a primary school? How do we define early childhood development? I think it has implication for everything that we have discussed over the 3 days, and I look forward to us really arriving at consensus, seeing that we are going to be signing a declaration. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, and absolutely agree with you that we do not have enough discussion around the earlier parts of early childhood. We make some critical assumptions, and it might be misassumptions as well, because by the time the child gets to us at 4, let's say preschool, yeah, so much else have gone wrong that teachers have to now spend time fixing or trying to catch up. So I agree with you, and it is a core part of our program, but I always come back to the program for early childhood, attending from 0 to 8 years old, yeah? But the challenge is that you're hitting the point on employment. It's also about a perception, because these teachers who graduate with the BEd sometimes don't necessarily want to go and work in the centers. They want to be in the classroom. They want to attend to the later years of early childhood. So we have to do a lot more work, not just with our teacher trainees. We have to do a lot more work with our teacher educators, because the implication for the practicum is that oftentimes when we place students on the practicum experience, we place them in the nursery schools and in the junior section of the primary education. So the implication is now we have to now begin to place students in these centers and get our ministries of education to understand that is a critical part of the practicum experience and does not in any way invalidate the qualification that the student gets at the end. I keep coming back for us to keep having this conversation, coming back for us to build consensus, to use your word, not just about how we define early childhood, but importantly, how do we define the formation of the early childhood practitioner?
Muchas gracias por la pregunta, Beda. Beda es la encargada.
Thanks for this question, because we know you're in charge of this unit in your country. Do we have another question? If we speak about early childhood, I think it's nice music. The early childhood is, it begins before you are born. Puericulture, after a child is born, involves social assistance, because very poor families, they need a support, a social support, and it's evident that education is very important in this early childhood. From 0 to 3. Meanwhile, here we have Dear ministers of education, education doesn't care of a child before it's born. When the baby is about to be born, if it's possible to do both things, very good. I saw this preoccupation about this early childhood, but I heard about the effects that we have. But yes, it should be part of the prioritization for literacy. If we see the problem for Brazil, it's the fragility of public networks in municipalities and states. So these are moments that we follow, and the early childhood is the fruit of an intersectorial work of these three sectors that I say, and I applaud that you're worried about this early childhood. What I suggest is that you consider an alliance, and perhaps I'm just looking at Brazil, but for us it's the fragility of the networks who cannot support so many things at the same time. That's why we need to make a school. But that was just a comment to contribute with this comment. Thank you, Bebeo. We are very tight on time. Stephanie, you wanted to say something? Okay, the last one, please. Thank you. As Academy in Guatemala, this union, this coalition is very valuable because our reality is strong. We're a multi-ethnical, multicultural country with lack of many things. And one of the courses Nidia was discussing, knowledge funds that makes us reflect upon the context of each community is very valuable, but our objective is the teacher's formation. So what we propose is that from this planning we include in those knowledge funds, but when we speak about the universal design of knowledge, we have realized that some teachers believe that a person with handicaps, glasses, or hard hearing, but I ask you all, who is not handicapped here? I use glasses, for example. Some of us don't hear to 100%. Some have a hard time walking down the stairs. Some cannot run. That's a handicap. And what we intend is that our teachers can handle all these situations from the beginning, from this planning. But we have found that there are persons who handle the personnel authorities who don't understand these changes that some teachers want to implement. And so we're happy that this coalition is coming to life. We want to hear what you're doing in other countries in order to achieve that all the actors, the stakeholders, teachers, directors, departmental directors, everybody involved, even the community, collaborates. Because it's not just a matter of teaching them how to read and write, it's thinking of the student as the center of education with a lifelong learning in order to become happy citizens. That should be the objective. So, as from Guatemala, I thank you because we know that this is very nurturing for us. Thank you.
Okay, last comment, question from St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm really happy to hear about this initiative, but I have some concerns. Certainly in our region, people are not naturally drawn to teaching and education. And sometimes a lot of the people that we have lack certain social skills that are necessary, not only in early childhood education, but education throughout. A sense of empathy, of kindness. These are qualities that, in my mind, are essential when we're talking about teachers. And you see a lack of passion for wanting to develop our children and our nation. So in your program, what have you explored, put together, that sort of teaches, empowers, engenders these qualities and skills outside of the knowledge and content that you will teach? Because you could have all the knowledge and content, but these essential skills, in my estimations, are critical. So I'd like to hear some insights about that. Thank you.
So this is an initiative that we are inviting people into consideration about, and it's one of the things that we certainly have to be paying attention to: the humanity, not just of the teacher, but the humanity of the student. A lot of times we miss that because teachers get caught up in the morass of the teaching conditions. They pay attention to the things that bring them down. I think an important lesson from this entire experience the last 3 days is the importance of helping teachers learn to have a different view, change the perspective. From which point are you looking at the situation? Because depending upon the angle that I'm taking with my view, all I could see is things that are wrong, as opposed to the angle that I take where I can recognize their challenges, but I can still see the points of hope. So in this coalition that we are seeking to form, it's not just about knowledge. It's also about the kinds of skills, about the aptitudes, sharing best practices, also creating spaces for where teachers who are being trained can have engagements with other teachers from across the different territories, and sharing challenges, but also sharing, this is how I dealt with it. Yeah? To create spaces where we have communities not just of good practice, but importantly, communities where education is constructed as agentic and hopeful. And that's what we are working towards building.
Gracias.
Yes, I'd like to take some time to focus, because I spoke about the work policy with the early childhood. This policy starts from the birth, from the pregnancy. So there you go, and you adopt different modalities where the child, before it is born, and now there's a program that frames this, what we were saying, which is called My New School. What happens here is that we define different standards for the quality of the teachers, the quality of those who work as formators of formators are within this policy, working fundamentally in this first phase. And in fact, this university has a master on early childhood that complements to help this work that's done on the early childhood. And as formers, we are forced to bring to the society teachers who have those competences to be able to work with students of the early childhood and in other aspects of education. And this is why also this set that we have formed is to share these experiences, this knowledge with other countries, to see how we enrich ourselves, our knowledges, among each others too, as I said from the beginning. Thank you. We need to close, but just to address the question about the University of West Indies, it considers this dimension of socio-emotional aspects, and therefore it is associated to very concrete working models towards the professional development that's happening today jointly with all colleges of the countries of the Eastern Caribbean. That's a good point. No, this is not just talking about ideals. No, we want to answer to very concrete needs that the countries have in regards to actualization of the curricula. And a very good point. And lastly, just to close on my behalf, the fact that we're here with representatives of universities as an element that's central of KIX and SUMMA. In this sense, we share the vision of the innovation ecosystem. It's not just the ministries of education. Universities play a central role in forming those policies and investigating and assessing and evaluate with a certain impartiality, because we require investigation and data. So it's very important to have you here. Thank you all, and we will continue discussing during the next days and weeks and months. Thank you. To continue, we have a presentation about the toolkit for the early childhood from the Education Down Foundation, which will be presented together with the initiative Impacta Más. And I want to have Amy Faux, Senior Representative, and María José Sepúlveda, Director of Evaluation of SUMMA. Are you here?
And good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the organisers and to the Ministry for creating such a collaborative atmosphere these last few days in this beautiful city. I feel like you've really been living up to the name of KIX. And for those of you that aren't already familiar with the Education Endowment Foundation, or the EEF, we are, in essence, to steal the cousins analogy, the slightly older British cousin of SUMMA, which I think maybe makes us second cousins with KIX, I'm not sure. And actually today I'm also going to be accompanied by my colleague Sandra, because we'll be talking about public goods we've developed to support early childhood education, and Sandra works on that really early phase of early childhood education at the EEF. And the public goods we'll be introducing today are really for you to consider whether or not a kind of locally adapted version would support the work that each country and nation is doing at KIX, or if it would support your regional priorities. I will then hand over to María José to talk about SUMMA's public good, Impacta Más. And firstly, just to explain a little bit behind the collaboration between EEF and SUMMA, We are partnered through a global network that, like the KIX Hub, is really concerned with bridging evidence to policy and practice. We don't have geographic conditions for our network or context-specific conditions. Instead, we are really a collaboration of 10 organizations. You can see the logos of those on your screen, who are joined by this shared evidence base. And this shared evidence base is actually a database of over 5,000 impact studies in education that looks at attainment. And you can see a snapshot of that on the left of your screen. And from this shared evidence base and with other principles that support our work, so shared standards in research, peer-to-peer learning, and methodological innovation, these are the sorts of public goods which are possible. On the right of your screen, you have just 4 of the members of the EEN to show you some examples of these public goods. We have 2 different types broadly. The first are these what we call evidence portals, which are in essence accessible summaries of that evidence base, that database. And then alongside that, we also develop guidance and training to support researchers, developers, and policymakers around research use. And you can see examples such as Impacta on your screen there. So, who are the EEF and what exactly are these early childhood education public goods that we have been developing? The Education Endowment Foundation was set up by the Ministry of Education in England, and really with this mission of closing that equity gap between disadvantaged pupils in our systems and their more affluent peers, and really to do this through improving evidence use within the English education system. And a focus actually on children from as young as 2 right up to age 19. And so this is just one of the resources that we have developed really to support early childhood education decision makers in England to really understand and use the evidence. This evidence portal, in essence, is a summary of 450 impact studies from our database. And these studies particularly pertain to children from 2 years old right up to age 6. And the methodology we have used to develop this resource is based on something called systematic review, which ensures that when we're looking at that global evidence base, we are reducing the bias as much as we possibly can in study selection for this resource. We then summarise this evidence base of 450 studies so that time-poor decision makers don't have to do that work themselves. We summarise it by 10 different approaches relevant to early childhood education, covering everything from communication and language to parental engagement, social-emotional learning, physical development. And for each of these approaches, we give a headline figure from the database. These headline figures show the impact this approach, on average, has made on attainment by month's progress. That's the figure in the orange bubble. The cost of the approach, which obviously is really crucial information for those decision makers. And then finally, the evidence security that underpins that approach, as shown by the padlock rating on your screen that some people sometimes think are handbags. And as you can see, if you look across this early childhood education evidence base, there are lots of reasons to be hopeful about the potential of early childhood in supporting children's attainment outcomes, because we can see a positive impact of somewhere between 3 and 7 months across all these approaches. However, I should also point out that in comparison to the evidence that we have in kind of school-age children, this evidence base is much less developed. There are fewer studies really here, which means that only a few of these areas have that higher security in terms of evidence, and they kind of cut across communication and language, literacy, and parental engagement. And alongside these kind of high-level headlines, we also give decision makers and practitioners these detailed entries which explore a number of things in relation to the studies, such as the key findings. We really focus and bring out the information on the impact on equity and how to really implement these approaches within your settings. This is just a snapshot of how it looks. And I should say, really importantly, we at EEF, we don't write these summaries alone. We actually work with policymakers, we work with practitioners to ensure that these summaries really reflect the local system, the conditions, and the priorities of those practitioners and policymakers. And there are a few principles around effective use I'd like to talk about because, this early years toolkit, it's really a gateway to the evidence base, which means it really should be used as such. And it's not really a how-to guide. Essentially, it's showing you what has worked and not what definitely will work in your system. We also really encourage people to look at the detail on the headlines and within the strands because it can be very tempting just to click, which of these approaches has the most impact. But without all of that detail, it's hard to make an informed decision about what will meet your priorities. Finally, and most importantly, this early years toolkit and evidence in general is not a substitute for professional judgment. We really encourage decision makers to use this resource alongside their knowledge of their children, of their systems, of their policy priorities, and so on. Before I hand over to Sandra, I'm just going to talk about a few use cases. So firstly, this resource has been used by our Ministry of Education to support an inclusive financing model in England, similar to the SEP model that Javier presented on yesterday. And this is really made possible by that cost and impact data within the toolkit. It's also been used by other organisations in our network. So the Dutch and the Belgian cousins of EEF and SUMMA have contextualised this toolkit for use in their systems. Oh, there we go. And finally, we also have developed a family of resources so that the toolkit can be used to support capacity building with early years educators in our systems. And the way I like to think of this resource that Sandra will talk through in more detail is kind of like the younger sister of the toolkit. And unlike her older sister, she is much less focused on just attainment and is also interested in other outcomes and is much more collaborative. So this resource was developed in direct collaboration with the ministry and also with practitioners in our system. And I will hand over to Sandra to talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you, and hello. And I'm Mexican, and I should speak in Spanish, but really I work in English in London, so I'll do it in English and let the professionals translate. But buenas tardes, me da mucha emoción estar aquí. So as Amy was saying, I'm going to talk about the evidence store, this younger sister, although that's not accurate, but it's a good analogy. And the evidence store also translates evidence, but it goes an extra step into translating it into actionable, practical recommendations that educators can put to practice. It was developed over 2 years, and it currently has 6 themes that you can see here: communication and language, personal, social, emotional development, early literacy, early mathematics, self-regulation and executive function, and physical development. And underneath those themes, we have a series of approaches that are ways in which educators can improve outcomes, those outcomes for children. So how can you improve communication and language? I'll go into that a bit later. But yeah, so this is the content right now. And what it does that sort of differentiates it from the toolkit is that it not only translates the evidence, it gives clear, super practical, granular recommendations for educators of what they should be doing in the setting. So it goes beyond the headline. And when there's enough and strong evidence, it shows how these recommendations look like in real settings, with videos and written examples. And, as Amy mentioned, is closely developed with educators who are engaged at every stage of the development process to get their input on the content, what we're categorizing as approaches and practices, and whether or not it's something that is happening in their settings. So it's this bridge between what the research says works and what is happening in classrooms, and making sure that that aligns, and giving educators the tools to make sure that aligns. So this is just a very quick screenshot of how it looks once you go into the evidence store, and I recommend you all to go into it because I don't have enough time. But under each theme, there are approaches. Here you can see communication and language, and one of the approaches is teaching and modeling vocabulary. This approach will have an evidence summary in really simple, accessible language that educators with different levels of qualifications can understand. And as has been mentioned here, educators in early years settings have different levels of qualifications according to what their professional development has been, and they come from different and maybe less formed education trajectories, or even, that's apprenticeships, that sort of thing, that also happens in England. Besides the evidence summary, we have the practices, and those are the granular ways I was talking about. And it's how would the educator teach and model vocabulary, naming and labeling objects, explaining and showing words and what they are, repeating what they hear from the children, imitating, extending language during an interaction, commenting on what children are doing, using words that the children can then sort of capture and use. And we have those examples that I mentioned, examples that are filmed in collaboration with educators who volunteer to be filmed in their settings. They're real-life settings. It's not scripted or planned. It's about us going into settings and capturing what's happening. And those videos sit at both the approach level, those are longer versions, but also they're tiny 10 to 15 seconds videos that show specific practices. So trying to make it as actionable as possible. And the final thing I'll talk about is just, and now covering both the toolkit and the evidence store, the engagement we've seen in the EEF and in the context of England. Over the last year, we've had 370,000 total page views across both the toolkit and the store. And then around 66,000 unique users for the toolkit, 60,000 for the store. These are the users that go in more than once. Total page views is every time the page is opened, but unique users are the users that go and might go in more than once. There's a split between the figures because we think the toolkit is more aimed at leaders who go in, I think this time, to just make decisions, and educators go in for professional development, which is a more continued process. And videos have had over 100,000 views. And that's it. Sorry for extending.
No, thank you very much to both of you. Sorry.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to greet you once more and thank you for the opportunity you've given me to share how this collaboration between SUMMA and EEF has taken place throughout this time. I'd also like to share how since 2016, we've been developing different public goods in this work. We started with the translation and localization of effective practices that EEF shared in our own platform. And then we moved forward to 2018, 2019 with orientation for effective teaching, with different guides on how to orient professors and teachers on effective teaching. And that transforms into a platform and a public good, an open resource that consolidates the different materials we have in the system. Now, in 2020 and 2021, we had the opportunity to work on a fund together with EF, and that allowed us to generate evidence for the improvement of learning. So we developed 4 evaluations, pilot and impact in different innovation programs, educational and innovation programs, with the objective of generating evidence for the improvement of learning. So what did we do during this process? We were able to summarize our learnings and our outcomes in the book, where we consolidated evaluating to improve and the different evaluations generated. And then during the last period, as I mentioned, we've been an active part of this global network, Evidence for Education network, that has allowed us to move forward with new collaborations and new generation of evidence based on impact evaluations. We're currently working together with the Ministry of Education in Chile in the system implementation and evaluation of educational trajectory systems. And we recently completed an impact evaluation on the program Growing Up and Playing. And I'd like to share a little bit about this for early childhood learning. Now, the program Growing Up Playing, this is an early childhood program that provides support to caretakers of children between 0 to 4 years old, and its focus is on strengthening the effective link and play. It also promotes parental abilities, and this was something that proved significant impact, and it has a high potential of scaling it, since there's already a consolidated model to create to train monitors in the program, and that's being implemented in different regions in our country. Now, the Impact Fund not only allows us to generate new evidence, but it also allows us to research and present a collaboration model among different actors or stakeholders, SUMMA as a broker, and technical counterpart implementers from the work they're performing with implementations and evaluators in providing this evidence. The evidence that we're generating has education centers and schools as the center, as a focus, and not only communicate what works, but how it's working, and to present in more depth Impacta Más. We were able to have in this fund different learnings, but also different challenges. We know there is a need to strengthen technical skills among the teams working on generating evidence, to generate or create a common language around evaluation that allows us to use evidence and the outcomes obtained. Now, in this process, we've identified that there's some tools like theory of change, which is key to open those black boxes of mechanisms of how interventions link actions to specific changes, to improvements in learning that allow us to better understand and to take our local reality, or to take it to our local reality. And now to focus on the needs. And here I'd like to present this new project of SUMMA, this public good. We developed Impacta Más, which is an ecosystem of resources created to strengthen the evaluation capacity and culture in the region. And this public good intends to provide free tools and materials to support all the different stages of intervention and political or public political programs. This was done in different phases, and I will not go into a lot of depth, but we can talk about that in the later. But today we're completing this ecosystem that allowed us to generate resources, but also to disseminate resources from others. And in this third stage, this is an implementation and dissemination phase of this ecosystem. And now to tell you a little bit more, we did an international benchmarking with several institutions, 157, and out of 157, only 26 were focused on development of skills, and only 4 were from Latin America. So nowadays we have 125 external resources from institutions that have supported it, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, our own resources from SUMMA, OECD, and other partners that you might see here. But with that, we can consolidate all of that in a repository that's available with handbooks, guides, verification or checklists, and others that will be available to be downloaded in this ecosystem. And this also allowed us to develop our own resources, the resources that I told you before that at the Impact Fund we considered were key and that were not available in the materials that we had available, such as the theory of change guideline to strengthen the design, implementation, evaluation of educational interventions to be able to move forward towards improvement evaluations and maximize the impact of our programs and evaluations. And last, we worked on a training route, which is what we are completing nowadays. And this public good intends to be installed throughout the entire cycle of programs and policies to be able to respond to the question why we're doing what we're doing and how we're going to evaluate that. Now, the challenge is how to incorporate the systems and this public goods into formal systems to be able to increase their use and allow us to inform decision makers and maximize the impact of educational programs and policies in our system. So with that, I end my presentation and I thank you. I'd also like to share this video. Evaluating policies and programs is crucial for informed decision making and for improving the quality of education. In regions like Latin America and the Caribbean, there are ongoing challenges, the need to strengthen learning and reduce gaps for historically excluded groups. And on the other, the scarcity of resources to invest in education. In this context, it is vital to develop ethically sound evaluation processes that boost the impact and relevance of strategies implemented in educational communities. Despite numerous efforts to strengthen educational evaluation systems in a region, at least 5 key challenges remain. Among them, difficulties in establishing a common approach, limited coordination among the stakeholders, disconnection from the needs of schools, rigidity of evaluation models, and weak technical training in evaluation. And these challenges limit evaluation as a driver of educational improvement. And to address these challenges, SUMMA has developed Impacta+, and a virtual ecosystem with open access resources designed to strengthen and enhance evaluation capacities in educational innovation teams, evaluators, and decision makers. Impacta+ offers a self-paced and user-friendly learning experience through a navigation journey organized by key content, strategies, and tools. This ecosystem enables understanding and developing relevant, rigorous, and context-adapted evaluation processes. The platform includes resources from SUMMA, as well as from international organizations and global evaluation leaders. This resource is organized into modules that address topics such as the importance of evaluation for educational improvement, the foundations, approaches, and stages of evaluation processes, the role of evaluation driving improvements, evidence-based decision-making, among others. We invite you to visit Impacta Más at impactamas.summaedu.org and explore the resources available to support the strengthening of a culture of evaluation in Latin America and the Caribbean. Join us in this experience. Very well. Thank you very much, EEF and SUMMA, for this presentation. I don't know if anybody has a question to close this presentation. Everything's so clear. Very well. Perfect. Thank you very much. Very well. So we still had one presentation for this block after lunch. And we will go on to our group picture. It'll be kind of a challenge because it just started raining, so we won't be able to go outside, but we will take this picture here at this stage. So the production team will help us organize everything and we'll give you instructions. And then we'll go on to lunch, and then we return at 2:30 for the final block of the encounter. Thank you. We'd like to leave you with a message from Andreas Schleicher, Director of Education and Competencies of OECD, who wasn't able to be or to attend the event, but he'd like to share some words for this regional event. And this message highlights the importance of collaborative work in order to achieve and accomplish great transformation.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to SUMMA again. This moment of disruptive change needs innovators like you more than ever. Globalization and digitalization have connected people, cities, countries, continents in ways that have vastly increased our individual and collective potential. But the same forces have also made this world more volatile, more complex, more uncertain, more ambiguous. The world has seen a growing disconnect between the infinite growth imperative and the finite resources of our planet, between the financial economy and the real economy, between the wealthy and the poor, between what is technologically possible and the social needs of people. I don't want to hold education responsible for all of that, certainly not, but neither should anyone underestimate the role that the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes and values of people play in social and economic development and in shaping the cultural context. You know, while digital technologies and globalization have always disruptive implications for our economic and social structure, those implications are never predetermined. It is always the nature of our collective responses to these disruptions that determines the outcomes. It's about the interplay between the technological frontier and the cultural, the social, the institutional, the economic agents that we mobilize in response. In short, if we want to see a different world, we need to build different education systems. We live in this world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach and test have also become easy to digitize, to automate. You know, of course, state-of-the-art knowledge is always going to remain important. But success in education is no longer mainly about reproducing content knowledge. It's about extrapolating from what we know and applying our knowledge creatively in new situations. Deep understanding is so much more important now than just remembering specific facts or figures. The conventional approach to teaching is often to break big problems down into smaller bits and pieces and then to teach students how to solve those bits and pieces. But the future will create value by synthesizing different fields of knowledge, making connections between ideas that, you know, sort of seem unrelated, and it's about connecting the dots where the next big idea, the next innovation is going to come from. In today's school, students typically learn individually, and at the end of the school year, we certify their individual achievement. You know what, the more interdependent the world becomes, the more we need great collaborators, great orchestrators. Teachers therefore need to become better at helping students think for themselves, but also to act for and with others. The past was divided, with teachers and content divided by subjects and students separated by expectations on their future careers. With schools often designed to keep students inside and the rest of the world outside. The future needs to be a lot more integrated, with an emphasis on the interrelation of subjects and the integration of students. It also needs to be much better connected so that learning is closely related to the real-world context and to the contemporary issues around students and open to the rich resources in our communities. The difference between education systems that are open to the world and ready to learn from and with others, and those that feel threatened by being exposed to alternative ways of thinking and working, it's going to be likely a big differentiator in the educational progress that we're going to see around the world. The world is indifferent to past reputation and unforgiving to frailty. Success is going to go with those individuals and nations that are swift to adapt, slow to complain, and open to the future. At SUMMA, you have this beautiful task to help society rise to this challenge and to educate the next generation for their future rather than just our past. Thank you.
And now we will go on to our last presentation.
We will discuss the reform of the policies for education with regional policies of the evidence of the educational systems of Latin America and the Caribbean. We will have Pedro Garret, coordinator of projects and investigator of SUMMA for KIX LAC's projects, and
Okay, buenos tardes. My colleague back in Paris gave you quite provocative questions to think about the big picture of education. And yesterday I talked about the connection between the evidence and the practice, particularly pedagogical practice. But also today, I want to also let you know about the next exciting chapter of the OECD collaboration with SUMMA to focus on another dimension of the use of evidence. So you might have probably already lots of research findings, evidence-based. And yesterday and the day before, we talked about how we can use evidence-based to improve the practice. But we know that that's not sufficient. And I think we haven't discussed enough so far why the picture of the change and conditions for change. And one important piece to consider is the political economy of change. Even if teachers know what effective practices could be based on the research, or even if the minister knows what could be the good organization of the education systems based on the research, if there's no coordinated and shared understanding among stakeholders, it will be very difficult to make the decisions towards the right directions. Or somebody a bit mentioned in the morning about the financing. And that's also important dilemma that you are facing all the time. Of course, nobody disagrees that education investment is important, but when it comes to within the limited resources, where you put money? Curriculum development, teacher training, or pedagogical materials, or more teacher pay? There are lots of confrontations and competing priorities. And to have a consistent policy directions, we need to have a good understanding of the political dynamics and politics of the reform, the implementation of the reform. So that's the topic that SUMMA and OECD wants to tackle in the next phase. And also focusing on the region of the Latin America, Central America, Caribbeans. And I want to present this new endeavor and the collaboration, not to inform you, but also to ask your help. We want to understand the reality of your countries from different perspectives. So we will open the survey focusing on the Latin America and Caribbean countries, inviting ministers, policymakers, teachers, teacher trainers, civil societies, researchers, which means you, everybody in this room. It will be probably around September, we will open this LAC survey to understand this political economy, and I hope that you can join as much as possible. The more perspectives from you we get, the better we understand the challenges and opportunities that you are facing. So this is a bit of heads up, and I hope that in the next years, when SUMMA organizes another meetings, we can also present the findings from this joint study. Thank you.
And it will be like that, and we hope to have the results for the next meeting. And to present details about this project, we will have Pedro Garret, coordinator of projects and investigator of SUMMA, and Mar Botero, coordinator of mobilization and knowledge transfer and community management of KIX LAC SUMMA. If someone can give me the pointer, please, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Good evening. I hope you enjoyed lunch. I congratulate you because you are bravely resisting, and we're moving towards the closing. It's been very nice. One of the initiatives we are promoting from SUMMA and KIX LAC, like Yuri was telling us, in an alliance with OECD, is a regional study that we want to conduct between this and the next year to understand the policy behind the educational reforms in the region, and we need to consider the actors, dynamics, and use of evidence in our educational systems, which is something that the OECD has been doing in the past in European countries, first world countries, including some of the region, but not all, and that's why our participation is so important in this new study. I will very quickly show you the first slides, but it's important that you see that the institutions we are partnering with, SUMMA and OECD, add a lot of efforts in order to get a better use of evidence, not just at the nominal level, but also in order to transform situations. Some lecturers from other days and today have talked about the way SUMMA is nurturing this transformation in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the OECD has a tradition of projects, studies linked to using evidence for policies and practices. They have 3 important reports just out of the oven that you can use. And this has allowed us to make some forward steps regarding dynamics and factors, and even face some of the models. We have like waves, linear model waves, relational model waves, and the more systemic waves we have now. Nevertheless, we see that this is still not enough to address the reality of our countries. So we have this need to perform a study, and this may sound like a cliche, but the use of evidence is important. We want to go a little bit further. Having more evidences doesn't mean having a better policy. We need to know what the questions behind these evidences are. There is knowledge in the region about how we produce, how political changes are produced, and what the role of evidence plays in this process of policies. How, where, when, and for whom this evidence is relevant. And in this sense, and I repeat this, in Latin America and the Caribbean, everything is a little bit more difficult. And in this complexity is where we want to stop. We've been talking in the rounds on the second day with experts about things like developing capacities on behalf of the state, interinstitutional articulation, vision problems that also define us as a region. In this sense, the objectives of the study are to develop new frameworks to inform strategies, national and regional, and land with the stakeholders and design better policies to improve the use of evidence. So, to speak about dates and the development of better capacities, more fair and more adequate. We have some questions of investigation. I won't read all the aspects. I will share this presentation with you, but basically a big line that we want to address for this problem is first to answer, how is this process of decision making at a political level that leads to the change of educational policies in Latin America and the Caribbean? This is the complexity we want to address as an investigation line. The other big question, and this is exactly where this alliance works, is to ask, how do we use this evidence in the process of decision-taking that leads to changes in policies in the different contexts? Like Yuri was saying, they have some surveys they have been developing with different stakeholders at the world level, and this will be the inspiration to somehow adequate and complement to the dynamics and the characteristics of our area. So, if we speak concretely about our job, what is it we need to do? First, from here, we summon and we call you to participate at this generation of evidence and have a commitment from the participating countries in this survey. The bigger the diversity, the richer the information will be to give some feedback for this study. We will do this. This is a milestone that we will do during the next months. From the different stakeholders and you as representatives, we ask that you take this information into account perhaps you will participate or convey this message to other stakeholders so more people can participate in the study. For this sake, from now to September, we will generate a survey surrounding the use of evidence to elaborate these policies. We will see things linked to social political changes, mobilization of knowledgement, the revision of literature, and everything linked to literature, to interviews. I've participated in many rounds, and in El Salvador they spoke about generating a culture of different, and I think this is transversal to what we've seen in other discussions. So due to the complexity of the study, we want to complement this survey by 2 or 3 case studies to begin, then we can make it bigger. But we want to ensure 2 to 3 cases. The first one will be the survey to have some information. Then we will see which cases we involve to make a deeper analysis, and then identify those practices, conceptions to highlight the study. The study is an alliance between SUMMA and the OECD. We're not alone. We will have an advisory board with which we had some meetings to give us feedback in the conceptual and methodology as we analyze results and the application of them. We have 8 persons from the academy who will be on the advisory group. They also have expertise in public handling in very concrete areas. And finally, to hear Javier González at the end, I want to highlight 3 big points and the contributions that this new study could give us. Let's not just stay at repetition of evidence, but let's move on to the institutionalization of the evidence in Latin America and the Caribbean. Second, it's important to holistically understand the commitment, the articulation, and the sense of agency among the different educational stakeholders, which are key in the process of the public policies in Latin America. And finally, that this is what helps us generate practical and strategical knowledge to strengthen the systems of knowledge mobilization, to inform the formulation of educational policies, and lastly, contribute to educational systems which are more efficient and equitable. Whenever we have news about the study, or you feel it knocking at your door, we hope to have an answer on your behalf to be able to carry on this proposal. And Javier, perhaps you want to say some closing words about this summoning. Very shortly, if we go back to action again, Pedro will hand you some brochures and forms for those countries who want to be a part of the study. It depends whether your country wants to participate or not. It's a survey. It's not one per ministry. It's directed to NOGs, to political parties, media, all kinds of stakeholders in your ecosystem. in regards of the educational debate in your countries. So those countries, this is not a contract. Don't be scared. We just need to know which countries are interested in participating in this survey. If you can give us your name, your email, and your contact person in your ministries to go into action. And after you fill out these forms, you can hand them over to somebody from SUMMA. This will be very important for us, and it will help you understand much better how decision making happens in our countries. Thank you so much. I'll invite Mar Botero from the KIX team to hear a summary about knowledge mobilization from these projects we saw these days. Mar, please come to the stage. One applause for her, please. I promise you this will be over soon, don't worry. Basically, I just wanted to take a minute from your time, not only to speak as the representative of knowledge mobilization of KIX, but also to speak as Mar Botero, this girl, 5, 6 years old. Some have heard this story, but it becomes my mantra and my guide of what I do. I'm Colombian. I grew up in a rural area, a country marked by violence and forced displacement. It's not only a story that I've lived, this is the story of over 8 million persons. And as you were saying yesterday, when you were saying that the school is a safe place, I want to tell you that this idea is not a metaphor for me. It was a reality. School was a safe place for me. And during the hardest years of violence in Colombia, all the institutions abandoned those territories, but school, but the teacher. And that is why I want to tell you that it's the teachers, the last ones to leave when this evacuation was a reality. The teacher was never left. He was always there. He filled me with hope. He taught me how to read and write, and he reconstructed in me a world that was possible and see where I am now. And that is why, from this girl, 6 years old, who still lives within me, I talk to you who are stakeholders who have the opportunity to transform the public policies in your countries. Please guarantee those conditions for this virtuous encounter between teacher and student takes place, because this encounter saves lives. And after this short story, and I just want to invite you to something very important. All these projects that we've presented are projects for you, with you. KIX is an open house. It's a house where we have projects with solutions. And we firmly believe that we are searching for those champions and endorsements, because we want to see you make those changes using the evidences in the unions, in the societies, and all the stakeholders, because it's that change, structural change, that we will close the gaps. We call you to build the different mechanisms that we have from KIX to mobilize knowledge. A special invitation to work together, to go deep into the experience of Sobral. You participated all this year, and the summoning continues to participate from our circle of knowledge mobilization that we've been working on with the different projects of applied knowledge. the practice communities, the articulation, the UNE project that we want to take to Central America. And of course, the coalition of faculties and the study that was just presented. So this is not an invitation that ends today. It's an ongoing invitation. And you know, I know you all. So you will get emails summoning, inviting you. And that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you.